welcome back to the Backyard Professor Chess videos. Let's do some more King's Gambit games. This one is by Bronstein and Panov. It was in Moscow in 1947. This was part of the, what is considered semi-famous or famous 10-game win streak using the King's Indian of David Bronstein. And he's playing the white pieces. And it is a typical King's Gambit opening, but Panov declines the King Gambit. He declines the Gambit pawn. He says, "No, I'm going to do something a little bit different here." Bronstein says, "That's okay. I'm going to keep right on developing like a typical King Gambit in the white opening," which is a good thing. Panov demonstrates a strength to his pawn and his bishop. He's going to develop rather than tinker over here and try to get a couple of quick passed pawns. He's going to do this a little bit differently. Bronstein says, "That's fine. I will prepare to meet you on your own grounds." And Panov comes up here. Now this is pretty aggressive on Black's part, bringing the bishop out to g4, put the pin on the knight against the queen, and we've seen before why they put that pin on that knight, because he's wanting to fight for this square and this square. By taking that knight out, if he so chooses, he takes away an attacker of his e5 pawn. So perhaps Panov wants the e5 and the d4 squares. And Bronstein says, "That's fine by me. I'm going to go ahead and take the pawn anyway." And he says, "That's fine. I will go ahead and retake the pawn. And now I have the d5 square. I'll let you have the d4 square, unless, of course, I fight you for it." These guys are creating weaknesses, and they're fighting for squares. This is usually how the grandmasters do it, and it's really interesting how they always attempt to do something like that. Bronstein develops his queen, hits the king, check. Bishop comes back to d7 to guard the king, and the queen comes back down here to c2. So he did put the king in check. He brought the pin off of the knight because perhaps he wants to fight for that d5 square, and he's developed his queen. So things are going somewhat smoothly for everybody right now. Knight c6, you can see the development continues, and now Bronstein is going to put the question to the bishop. He's gaining more queenside space with those pawn thrusts. b4. Bishop gently drops back to d6, which is not a problem for Panov at this point. Bronstein has a knight out, so he's going to pull his bishop up to c4, coming across to this weak f7 square, right? Panov continues to develop. That was the fascinating thing about the Russians, the Grandmaster chess in between the World Wars and then post-World War chess. The Russians just dominated everything. They just knew how to play phenomenal chess. And we are beneficiaries of that as we play through their games, aren't we? Now they're both going to castle, but they're going to castle on the opposite sides of the board. This usually indicates a very sharp battle coming up when you castle opposite sides. Now, all tenderness, all gentleness, all passivity is off. Now Bronstein is going to go to the king. Now Panov is going to go to the king. And now you can see the queen side of Bronstein is probably greater space. Panov has the center space. He doesn't really have pawns pointing to the king side, but with his bishop looking like a tall pawn at this point, Panov is probably going to want to do a queen side or a king side, and Bronstein looks to me like he's heading up the queen side, and then he really does show us, guess what, I am heading up the queen side. So the effective strategy, the idea here is Bronstein is going to attempt to create some weaknesses, give himself some targets so he can attack them, right? I mean, this is how the grandmasters play the chess. Panov doesn't have any weaknesses so far that we can detect at all on the queen side. Well, they aren't going to appear unless you create them. So this is the idea. Bronstein's going to thrust his pawns, see if he can create some weaknesses, get some tactical battles in there. Panov is going to do the exact same thing to Bronstein. His response is really interesting. He meets him all the way up to a5. That puts a stop to the rook pawn, right? Bronstein has more than a rook pawn, though. He pushes b5, puts the question to the knight. And now it drops that knight right back down to his original square. And this isn't necessarily weak, because having castled on this side, a knight here is a very good protective piece. He's really got a pretty decent defensive setup at this point. So he's doing okay. He's not in trouble in any manner. Bronstein's going to bring his other knight into this battle, of course. Panov comes back here and once again pins this knight to this empty square. He's going to come down, and if he can take this knight, he can see that the battle for the d5 is coming on hard. He's touching it and touching it. The knight is up here. The battle, Panov is trying to keep the battle in the center. Now, and this is good strategy, because whenever your opponent makes a wing attack, you want to have a strong center. You want to go into the center. So Panov is basically attempting to follow this particular theme here. Bronstein's continuing to go to the queen side. Now he's getting to where what he's going to do is he's going to attempt to get Panov to push some pawns to create some weaknesses. And so he's arranging his pawns and his pieces in a coordinated effort to come at the queen side to see if he can get Panov to do something significant for Bronstein. And here he does. This is very nice. Now, when you push the pawns in front of your king, you're going to create weak squares, right? You can see the light squares here are very weak. He had that pawn there. He was guarding these squares here, these light squares. Now that he's pushed the pawn to stop Bronstein from pushing the pawn, now we see weaknesses. Now this c7 pawn is weak. This square here, this square here, this square here. Now he's got weaknesses. This gives Bronstein a target. Panov hasn't been as fast over here to create weaknesses in Bronstein's view. Bronstein is creating the weaknesses in Panov's camp. And so this will be very interesting to see how he exploits this. Bishop e3, of course, coming right through that diagonal toward his king. Very nice. Knight b to d7. The knight comes out to give some extra support to these two squares here. He also gives extra support to his center. And now Bronstein brings his rook over into the center. And once again, Panov can't decide whether he's going to take that knight or defend his king. So he pops his bishop back again on e6. Now this is interesting because by bringing his bishop back, this is Panov's good bishop. And you can see by the pawns on the white that this is Bronstein's bad bishop, but it's an effective bishop. It's not behind the pawns, but it is Bronstein's bad bishop. And of course, he's going to change that off. This is good chess strategy on Bronstein's part. Trade your bad bishop for the opponent's good bishop. Absolutely. Now, what this does, it eliminates both of the bishop's pairs for the opponents, right? So neither one of them have the bishop pair. This does look like it could be a closed. Right now, the center isn't closed. It's occupied by a lot of pieces, and there's an enormous battle going on for the center, and Bronstein has been probing on the queen side, trying to find some weaknesses here. So this is going to be a terrific battle, but it does look to me at this point, based on what I'm seeing, that the knights are going to prove very effective if they can get to their outposts. If they can post them on a strong square. Look at that square for Bronstein's knight. Would he just kill to have a knight on c6? Yes, he would. Look at this square for Panov's knight, or even this square, even though it's got the pawn guarding it, he might be able to take that pawn or induce that pawn to move forward and have an outpost. So this looks like it's going to be a knight's game. They've swapped the bishop pair, so it'll be interesting to see if they develop their knights. King goes boink over to h1, and queen comes back down to e7. She's okay there for the moment. And now knight comes back down to d2. Pawn's tipsy on his side there. And the knight comes up to g4. Now, Bronstein has been probing Panov's queen side to see if he can induce him to create weaknesses. Now Panov starts probing Bronstein's side to see if he can induce any weaknesses so that he too can have a target to attack. That's interesting how that works, isn't it? And he's hitting the bishop, of course. Well, the bishop drops down to g1. And you know, to me, every time they make moves like this, you kind of shake your head and you go, really? You're going to put your bishop all the way down there and have only one diagonal? But look at that diagonal. Look at the direction the diagonal's going. That is a really strong bishop. That's kind of interesting to see how that works, isn't it? And now, and you can see the difference. Just a minute ago, Bronstein traded off his bad bishop for Panov's good bishop. True, Bronstein's bishop is way down here on the first rank. That's true. His influence is much stronger than Panov's. Panov's influence stops right here because that's a locked pawn, and it only goes over to here. And this, he's got a great queen backing him up, but there's nothing over here that he can do with that diagonal. If his queen was here and that pawn was there and his diagonal was going this way, that would be vastly much better. So you can see the difference between the bishops, even though Bronstein's is way down here on the first rank. I think Bronstein's bishop is much stronger than Panov's. Panov's, now I'm not ridiculing Panov because he's doing a great defensive power here. His knight, his queen, and his bishop, and his knight is protecting that d5 pawn. That's true. That d5 pawn's pretty solid. Bronstein can attempt to undermine it with a pawn thrust. That's true. I'm just pointing out at this point the influence of the direction of the bishops, I personally think, favor Bronstein. So anyway, that's my 2 cents worth. And now h5, and here he comes. Now, he's going to start trying to get something going on the king side, which is proper chess, because Bronstein is making inroads over here on the queen side, and he's still making overtures toward the queen side, and he's probing for more weaknesses. So this is, he's going to build up the pressure, more or less. He's going to try to. Now look at what Panov's doing. Panov, rather than just reacting to everything Bronstein's doing here, he is building up his own side and attack. He's got the queen coming over to here. Once he opens this pawn up, the bishop will have great influence. The knight can hop over here pretty quick to get to the king side. So again, they're still kind of probing each other. They're trying to look for, what can I get you to do that gives you a weakness? And Bronstein doesn't probe anymore. He just simply eliminates the bishop. He says, you know what? I'm going to take that bishop. And now you can see why. Again, he indirectly attacked the weakness. Isn't that interesting? The weak pawn here on c7. It was guarding the bishop. By exchanging the knight for the bishop, the pawn moves, and now the king is wide open. And now the weakness isn't just c7, it's now b6 and d6. Now Bronstein has a lot of things he can go do on this queen side, just by one simple exchange. That's fascinating how that works, isn't it? That's real fun to see that. Knight drops down to d2. He's going to scurry over to the queen side, certainly. Now you see, he's strengthening. He's you know, chess is such a funny game because you kind of start feeling a sense of urgency for Panov, don't you? You say, hey, you really are. Bronstein's going to be coming at you pretty quick. You better get something going hard. Now you've got this rook backing up this pawn. Ram that baby down and start disrupting his king side. Attack his king side. Make him react to you. He does a good pawn push that supports the pawns, but it's slow. Your king is now open. You're getting weaknesses, and Bronstein's going to come after you. So you got to hurry. You got to go now. You got to put the pedal to the metal, right? To me, that just looked like he was taking a nice, pleasant stroll on a Sunday afternoon in the park, and you got to be running like heck. You know what I mean? And sure enough, again, knight c4. Great post for the knight, and of course, probing that queen side. Here comes Bronstein. And he knows it too, king b7. He knows it. All he has to do is start popping rooks over here and pushing pawns, and Bronstein's going to have a very, very terrific attack. But rather than do that, look what he does. This fabulous bishop, again, he created the weaknesses by exchanging his knight for the bishop, opening up the king, and making the d and the b6 pawns weak. Now that he made the weakness, yes, the king is guarding it, but that wonderful bishop has that power and influence. Now he's creating more weaknesses. Now this is not only weak, the a5 is weak, the d6 is weak. He's going to have this whole file. Now Panov is in trouble. That is a very strong move. And true, the knight can respond. It's an exchange. He's down the exchange, a pawn for a bishop. But again, it's the position. He is making weaknesses and then attacking those weaknesses. And this is really kind of instructive to see how he does this. Panov's defense is just not as strong as it appears to be. Now he takes the next weakness that he created and goes check to the king. You can see how Bronstein systematically, step by step, has broken through the queen side. Now the question is, can Panov survive the attack? That's the only question available now, because here he comes. And look at that outpost. Again, earlier on, the c6, because he probed, because he presented his pawns, he created weaknesses that gave him targets, and he's attacked those targets. Now he's created a phenomenal knight outpost, hitting the queen and the rook. That is beautiful chess. Bronstein was so doggone good at this. I can't wait till I can get this good. The queen drops down to e8. Now, it's true, Bronstein could beat the exchange here by taking that rook. That's true with that magnificent knight. And that knight's not going to be chased away. That knight's there permanent. That's a beautiful way. On the very strongest rank, the 6th, the very strongest rank that a knight could possibly be on, there he is in all his glory. Rather than being materialistic, though, Bronstein sees something else. And I know there's so much to look at in chess. We constantly have to keep this list of things that's like, 2.5 miles long in our mind on every move in a chess game. I'm well aware of that. The pawns here are both passed. And Panov is definitely back on his heels. He's been hit a couple times. Boom, boom. This is getting tough. So Bronstein keeps going. Why not? The passed pawns can be extremely powerful here. And then the knight drops down to d7. You can see that the nature of the particular movement of Bronstein's pieces is gently backing Panov up. if not brutally just getting rid of him. And now why not? Keep going with the pawns. B6 check. Nice. You got to be happy with that. And now why not? Keep pushing. A6 check. Just take those babies all the way in. King takes the knight pawn. And now, of course, here come the rooks. Rook bishop 1, or rook b1. Check, and it's there that he resigned. Because, of course, the game is, for all intents and purposes, completely over. Again, the open files. Rook work on open files. This game really helps illustrate, I felt in a really nice way, the way to probe an area to create weaknesses. Induce your opponent to push a pawn forward. To strengthen a pawn center. You notice Panov never did get blown off the center. He really did have a very powerful center, a well-supported center all over the place. But once Bronstein was able to create weaknesses and see weaknesses on the queen side, pow, that's where he went. Over and over and over and over again. He emphasized those weaknesses. He attacked those weak squares. He attacked those weak pieces. And he had a breakthrough. That's great chess. That's fun to see how to do this. So there's your chess exercise for the day. Remember, I have a long list of crap I always tell you too. I guess I've been told to quit influencing you guys with the popcorn. I feel bad about that. I watched The Hobbit last night, The Return of Smaug, and I cooked me a big old bowl of popcorn. That's a great movie. I thought about chess a little bit, but I watched a dragon last night, so that's the way it is. When I start studying the Sicilian dragon, yeah, I'll be thinking of Smaug in The Hobbit. Great movie. If you haven't seen it, go see it. Anyway, there you go. Have a great day, and I'll see you guys in the next chess video.